The Daddy-Long-Legs and the Fly. Once Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs, dressed in brown and grey, walked about upon the sands upon a summer's day. And there among the pebbles, when the wind was rather cold, he met with Mr. Floppy Fly, all dressed in blue and gold. And as it was too soon to dine, they drank some periwinkle wine, and played an hour or two or more at battlecock and shuttledore. Said Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs to Mr. Floppy Fly, "Why do you never come to court? I wish you'd tell me why. All gold and shine, in dress so fine, you'd quite delight the court. Why do you never go at all? I really think you ought. And if you went, you'd see such sights, such rugs and jugs and candle lights, and more than all, the king and queen, one in red and one in green." "Oh, Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs," said Mr. Floppy Fly, "it's true I never go to court, and I will tell you why. If I had 6 long legs like yours, at once I'd go to court. But oh, I can't, because my legs are so extremely short. And I'm afraid the king and queen, one in red and one in green, would say aloud, 'You are not fit, you fly, to come to court a bit.'" "Oh, Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs," said Mr. Floppy Fly, "I wish you'd sing one little song, one Mumbian melody. You used to sing so awful well in former days gone by, but now you never sing at all. I wish you'd tell me why. For if you would, the silvery sound would please the shrimps and cockles round, and all the crabs would gladly come to hear you sing, 'Ah, hum-de-hum.'" Said Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs, "I can never sing again, and if you wish I'll tell you why, although it gives me pain. For years I cannot hum a bit or sing the smallest song, and this the dreadful reason is, my legs are grown too long. My 6 long legs all here and there oppress my bosom with despair, and if I stand or lie or sit, I cannot sing one single bit." So Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs and Mr. Floppy Fly sat down in silence by the sea and gazed upon the sky. They said, "This is a dreadful thing, the world has all gone wrong, since one has legs too short by half, the other much too long. One never more can go to court because his legs have grown too short, the other cannot sing a song because his legs have grown too long." Then Mr. Daddy-Long-Legs and Mr. Floppy Fly rushed downward to the foamy sea with one sponge-taneous cry, and there they found a little boat whose sails were pink and grey, and off they sailed among the waves far and far away. They sailed across the silent main and reached the great Grumboolian plain, and there they play for evermore at battlecock and shuttledore. The Owl and the Pussycat. The Owl and the Pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The Owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar, "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are, you are. You are, what a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the Owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried. But what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows, and there in a wood a piggy-week stood, with a ring at the end of his nose, his nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" Said the piggy, "I will." So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon, and hand in hand on the edge of the sand they danced by the light of the moon, the moon, they danced by the light of the moon. The Duck and the Kangaroo. Said the Duck to the Kangaroo, "Good gracious, how you hop, over the fields and the water too, as if you never would stop. My life is a bore in this nasty pond, and I long to go out in the world beyond. I wish I could hop like you," said the Duck to the Kangaroo. "Please give me a ride on your back," said the duck to the kangaroo. "I would sit quite still and say nothing but quack the whole of the long day through. And we'd go to the Dee and the Jelly-Bow Lee, over the land and over the sea. Please take me a ride, oh do," said the duck to the kangaroo. Said the kangaroo to the duck, "This requires some little reflection. Perhaps on the whole it might bring me luck. And there seems but one objection, which is, if you let me speak so bold, your feet are unpleasantly wet and cold, and would probably give me the rheumatiz," said the kangaroo. Said the duck, "As I sat on the rocks, I've thought over that completely, and I bought 4 pairs of worsted socks, which fit my web feet neatly. And to keep out the cold, I bought a cloak, and every day a cigar I'll smoke, all to follow my own dear true love of a kangaroo." Said the kangaroo, "I'm ready, all in the moonlight pale, but to balance me well, dear duck, sit steady, and quite at the end of my tail." So away they went with a hop and a bound, and they hopped the whole world 3 times round. And who so happy, oh who, as the duck and the kangaroo? The table and the chair. Said the table to the chair, "You can hardly be aware how I suffer from the heat, and from chilblains on my feet. If we took a little walk, we might have a little talk. Pray let us take the air," said the table to the chair. Said the chair unto the table, "Now you know we are not able, how foolishly you talk, when you know we cannot walk." Said the table with a sigh, "It can do no harm to try. I've as many legs as you. Why can't we walk on 2? So they both went slowly down and walked about the town, with a cheerful bumpy sound as they toddled round and round. And everybody cried as they hastened to their side, "See, the table and the chair have come out to take the air." But in going down an alley to a castle in a valley, they completely lost their way, and wandered all the day, till to see them safely back they paid a ducky quack, and a beetle and a mouse, who took them to their house. Then they whispered to each other, "Oh, delightful little brother, what a lovely walk we've taken. Let us dine on beans and bacon." So the ducky and the leetle, brownie mousy and the beetle, dined and danced upon their heads, till they toddled to their beds. The broom, the shovel, the poker, and the tongs. The broom and the shovel, the poker and tongs, they all took a drive in the park, and they each sang a song, ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, before they went back in the dark. Mr. Poker, he sat quite upright in the coach. Mr. Tongs made a clatter and a clash. Miss Shovel was dressed all in black, with a brooch. Mrs. Broom was in blue, with a sash. Ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, and they all sang a song. "Oh, Shovelly, so lovely," the poker he sang, "you've perfectly conquered my heart. Ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, if you're pleased with my song, I will feed you with cold apple tart. When you scrape up the coals with a delicate sound, you enrapture my life with delight. Your nose is so shiny, your head is so round, and your shape is so slender and bright. Ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, ain't you pleased with my song?" "Alas, Mrs. Broom," sighed the Tongs in his song, "oh, is it because I'm so thin, and my legs are so long, ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, that you don't care about me a pin? Ah, fairest of creatures, when sweeping the room, oh, why don't you heed my complaint? Must you needs be so cruel, you beautiful Broom, because you're covered with paint? Ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, you are certainly wrong." Mrs. Broom and Miss Shovel together they sang, "What nonsense you're singing today." Said the Shovel, "I'll certainly hit you a bang." Said the Broom, "and I'll sweep you away." So the coachman drove homeward as fast as he could, perceiving their anger with pain. But they put on the kettle, and little by little they all became happy again. Ding-a-dong, ding-a-dong, there's an end of my song. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus. First part. Mr. and Mrs. Discobolus climbed to the top of a wall, and they sat to watch the sunset sky and to hear the Nupiter pifkin cry and the biscuit buffalo call. They took up a roll and some chamomile tea, and both were as happy could be, till Mrs Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head. Suppose we should happen to fall. Darling Mr Discobolus. Suppose we should fall down flumpety, just like pieces of stone, onto the thorns or into the moat. What would become of your new green coat? And might you not break a bone? It never occurred to me before that perhaps we shall never go down any more." And Mrs Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, what put it into your head to climb up this wall, my own darling Mr Discobolus?" Mr Discobolus answered, "At first it gave me pain, and I felt my ears turn perfectly pink when your exclamation made me think we might never get down again. But now I believe it is wiser far to remain for ever just where we are." And Mr Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head we shall never go down again, dearest Mrs Discobolus." So Mr and Mrs Discobolus stood up and began to sing, "Far away from hurry and strife, here we will pass the rest of life. Ding-a-dong, ding-dong, ding. We want no knives, nor forks, nor chairs, no tables, nor carpets, nor household cares. From worry of life we've fled. Oh, WXYZ, there is no more trouble ahead, sorrow or any such thing, for Mr and Mrs Discobolus." Mr and Mrs Discobolus, second part. Mr and Mrs Discobolus lived on top of the wall for 20 years, a month and a day, till their hair had grown all pearly grey and their teeth began to fall. They never were ill or at all dejected, by all admired, and by some respected, till Mrs Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, it has just come into my head we have no more room at all, darling Mr Discobolus. Look at our 6 fine boys and our 6 sweet girls so fair. Upon this wall they have all been born, and not one of the 12 has happened to fall through my maternal care. Surely they should not pass their lives without any chance of husbands or wives." And Mrs Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, did it never come into your head that our lives must be lived elsewhere, dearest Mr Discobolus? They have never been at a ball, nor have ever seen a bazaar, nor have ever heard folks say in a tone all hearty, 'What loves of girls at a garden party those Mrs Discobolus are!' Morning and night it drives me wild to think of the fate of each darling child." But Mr Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, what has come to your fiddledom head? What a runcible goose you are, Octopod Mrs Discobolus." Suddenly Mr Discobolus slid from the top of the wall, and beneath it he dug a dreadful trench, and filled it with dynamite, gunpowder, gench, and aloud he began to call, "Let the wild bee sing and the bluebird hum, for the end of your lives has certainly come." And Mrs Discobolus said, "Oh, WXYZ, we shall presently all be dead on this ancient runcible wall. Terrible Mr Discobolus." Pensively Mr Discobolus sat with his back to the wall. He lighted a match and fired the train, and the mortified mountain echoed again to the sound of an awful fall. And all the Discobolus family flew in thousands of bits to the sky so blue, and no one was left to have said, "Oh, WXYZ, has it come into anyone's head that the end has happened to all of the whole of the clan Discobolus?" The Nutcrackers and the Sugar Tongs. The Nutcracker sat by a plate on the table. The Sugar Tongs sat by a plate at his side, and the Nutcracker said, "Don't you wish we were able along the blue hills and green meadows to ride? Must we drag on this stupid existence forever, so idle and weary, so full of remorse? Well, everyone else takes his pleasure, and never seems happy unless he's riding a horse. Don't you think we could ride without being instructed, without any saddle or bridle or spur? Our legs are so long and so aptly constructed, I'm sure that an accident could not occur. Let us all of a sudden hop down from the table and hustle downstairs and each jump on a horse. Shall we try? Shall we go? Do you think we are able?" The Sugar-tongs answered distinctly, "Of course." So down the long staircase they hopped in a minute. The Sugar-tongs snapped and the crackers said crack. The stable was open, the horses were in it. Each took out a pony and jumped on his back. The cat in a fright scrambled out of the doorway. The mice tumbled out of a bundle of hay. The brown and white rats, and the black ones from Norway, screamed out, "They are taking the horses away." The whole of the household was filled with amazement. The cups and the saucers danced madly about. The plates and the dishes looked out of the casement. The salt-cellar stood on his head with a shout. The spoons with a clatter looked out of the lattice. The mustard pot climbed up the gooseberry pies. The soup ladle peeped through a heap of veal patties, and squeaked with a ladle-like scream of surprise. The frying-pan said it's an awful delusion. The tea-kettle hissed and grew black in the face, and they all rushed downstairs in the wildest confusion to see the great nutcracker Sugar-tong race. And out of the stable, with screamings and laughter, their ponies were cream-coloured, speckled with brown. The nutcrackers first and the Sugar-tongs after rode all round the yard and then all round the town. They rode through the street and they rode by the station. They galloped away to the beautiful shore. In silence they rode and made no observation, save this: "We will never go back any more." And still you might hear, till they rode out of hearing, the Sugar-tongs snap and the crackers say crack, till far in the distance, their forms disappearing, they faded away, and they never came back. The Two Old Bachelors. 2 old bachelors were living in one house. One caught a muffin, the other caught a mouse. Said he who caught the muffin to him who caught the mouse, "This happens just in time, for we've nothing in the house, save a tiny slice of lemon and a teaspoonful of honey, and what to do for dinner, since we haven't any money? And what can we expect if we haven't any dinner, but to lose our teeth and eyelashes, and keep on growing thinner?" Said he who caught the mouse to him who caught the muffin, "We might cook this little mouse if only we had some stuffing. If we had but sage and onion, we could do extremely well. But how to get that stuffing, it is difficult to tell." Those 2 old bachelors ran quickly to the town, and asked for sage and onion as they wandered up and down. They borrowed 2 large onions, but no sage was to be found in the shops or in the market or in all the gardens round. But someone said, "A hill there is a little to the north, and to its perpendicular top a narrow way leads forth. And there among the rugged rocks abides an ancient sage, an earnest man who reads all day a most perplexing page. Climb up and seize him by the toes, all studious as he sits, and pull him down, and chop him into endless little bits. Then mix him with your onion, cut up likewise into scraps, when your stuffing will be ready, and very good." Perhaps. Those 2 old bachelors, without loss of time, the nearly perpendicular crags at once began to climb, and at the top, among the rocks, all seated in a nook, they saw that sage reading of a most enormous book. "You earnest sage," aloud they cried, "your book you've read enough in. We wish to chop you into bits, to mix you into stuffing." But that old sage looked calmly up, and with his awful book, at those 2 bachelors' bald heads a certain aim he took, and over crag and precipice they rolled promiscuous down. At once they rolled and never stopped in lane or field or town. And when they reached their house they found, besides their want of stuffing, the mouse had fled, and previously had eaten up the muffin. They left their home in silence by the once convivial door, and from that hour those bachelors were never heard of more. The Pobble Who Has No Toes. The Pobble Who Has No Toes had once as many as we. When they said, "Some day you may lose them all," he replied, "Oh, fish fiddle-de-dee." And his Aunt Jobiska made him drink lavender water tinged with pink, for she said, "The world in general knows there's nothing so good for a Pobble's toes." The Pobble who has no toes swam across the Bristol Channel, but before he set out he wrapped his nose in a piece of scarlet flannel, for his Aunt Jobiska said, "No harm can come to his toes if his nose is warm, and it's perfectly known that a Pobble's toes are safe, provided he minds his nose." The Pobble swam fast and well, and when boats or ships came near him, he tinkledy-binkledy winkled a bell, so that all the world could hear him. And all the sailors and admirals cried, when they saw him nearing the further side, "He's gone to fish for his Aunt Jobiska's runcible cat with crimson whiskers." But before he touched the shore of the Bristol Channel, a sea-green porpoise carried away his wrapper of scarlet flannel. And when he came to observe his feet, formerly garnished with toes so neat, his face at once became forlorn, on perceiving that all his toes were gone. And nobody ever knew from that dark day to the present whoso had taken the Pobble's toes in a manner so far from pleasant, whether the shrimps or crawfish grey or crafty mermaids stole them away. Nobody knew, and nobody knows how the Pobble was robbed of his twice 5 toes. The Pobble who has no toes was placed in a friendly bark, and they rowed him back and carried him up to his Aunt Jobiska's park. And she made him a feast at his earnest wish, of eggs and buttercups fried with fish. And she said, "It's a fact the whole world knows that Pobbles are happier without their toes." The Jumblies. They went to sea in a sieve, they did. In a sieve they went to sea. In spite of all their friends could say, on a winter's morn, on a stormy day, in a sieve they